Okay, wow. This is a lot about human history. It looks like someone has been doing some reading. Are we diving into Yuval Noah Harari's Sapiens for this deep dive?
It's such a great book. And yeah, we're going to tackle some big questions about, well, us,
Yeah.
like where we came from and all that, how we got to this crazy point, and what might even be next for humans.
I'm in. Just flipping through the pages here, I'm reminded that Sapiens starts with something pretty mind-blowing.
It wasn't always just us, right? Like, for a long time, there were other types of humans on this planet.
Yeah, it really challenges that whole march of progress thing you see sometimes. Like from apes straight to us, it was way more complicated. We had Neanderthals, Homo erectus.
Like cousins?
Yeah, totally. And each of them was adapted to their own environments, and then suddenly they vanish. Poof.
It makes you wonder, what was our role in all that? Like, did Sapiens just outcompete everyone else for food and stuff? Or was there, like, actual fighting? I mean, we're the only ones left. Kind of creepy when you think about it.
Makes you think about what it even means to be human, right? Right. Was there something about Sapiens, maybe our ability to cooperate, but also to be, well, pretty brutal, that changed everything?
And this ties into another big idea from Sapiens, the cost of all this thinking we do. Having these big brains is awesome in lots of ways, but it comes with a whole set of challenges.
Like what?
Well, think about just having babies. Our babies are born with these super underdeveloped brains, which means they need us for a lot longer than most other animals.
Oh, so we're stuck being parents for ages?
Pretty much. That takes huge resources, and makes sapiens really vulnerable for a long time.
Yeah.
So it's this trade-off. We get smarts in complex societies, but we're also kind of fragile, and our brains need a ton of energy to keep going, like constantly.
Man, that is wild. So big brains, good and bad. What else does Harari say makes Sapiens so different?
Well, he argues that what really set us apart, what let us build these huge societies and, let's face it, dominate the planet, is our ability to believe in things that don't actually exist, like
Yeah.
shared myths.
Shared myths, what are you talking about? Like religion and stuff?
Not just religion. Think about it. Nations, laws, money, corporations, even human rights, none of that exists outside of our collective imagination.
Whoa, so you're saying money isn't real? I wish someone had told me that before I got my student loans.
Well, it's real in the sense that it affects our lives, but it's not like a tree or a rock. It's not physically there, but we all agree it's important, so it has power. Think about it. A piece of paper is just a piece of paper until we all agree it's worth something.
Okay, that's kind of blowing my mind. So we just made up money and all that other stuff. So like shared myths are good.
They're powerful. They let us organize, build, cooperate on a scale that no other species can match. That's what let sapiens go from small tribes to, well, everything we have today.
So where do these shared myths lead us next? What's the next big turning point in the Sapiens story?
Well, that would be the agricultural revolution, switching from hunting and gathering to farming. It's usually seen as this big step forward, but Harari suggests it might be more complicated than that.
He actually uses the word trap. Wait, is he saying farming was a mistake?
I wouldn't say mistake, but it definitely wasn't just rainbows and sunshine. Yeah, you get more food, bigger populations, people settling down in one place.
Right.
But it also meant working longer and harder, eating a less diverse diet, and being more vulnerable to, say, famines or diseases that spread quickly in crowded communities.
Yeah, I guess I never thought about it like that. More food, but more problems too.
Exactly. It was a huge transformation. We changed our relationship with the environment, with each other, with, well, everything.
So what made us go down this path?
Harari argues that it was probably gradual, lots of little decisions that seemed like a good idea at the time, but ended up changing the course of human history.
Like what?
Maybe those early farmers just wanted security, a reliable food supply instead of the uncertainty of hunting and gathering. And as they settled down, they started, producing more food than they needed right away.
A surplus.
Exactly. And that leads to, well, more people being born, bigger villages, and eventually towns, cities, even social hierarchies. Like suddenly you have chiefs and priests and all these different roles that didn't really exist in small nomadic groups.
And power structures.
Oh, yeah. Someone has to be in charge, right? And that brings us to empires, one of those things Harari explores in depth. These massive entities that have, well, they shaped the world we live in, that's for sure.
Empires are interesting. They spread knowledge and new ways of doing things, but often through conquest.
That's the thing. It's this mix of innovation and exploitation, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, they spread technology and ideas, but often at the expense of other cultures.
And what's crazy is how they manage to control the narrative about their own history. Like they even co-opt the memories of the people they conquered.
Totally. Think about the Roman Empire. We still romanticize them, admire their art and architecture and law, but often we forget about the brutal reality of their conquests, the slavery.
Yeah, it's like we're looking at it through rose-colored glasses.
It's important to be aware of those biases.
Hmm.
Look beyond the official story and try to see things from the perspective of those who are marginalized or even silenced by the empire.
That's a good point, especially when we consider how the legacies of those empires still affect us today. We're dealing with the aftereffects of colonialism, cultural appropriation, all these imbalances of power that go back to those imperial histories.
Mhm.
Okay, so speaking of how the past influences the present, let's shift gears a bit. How about the scientific revolution? What happened there and how did it change, well, everything?
It's often presented as this sudden burst of genius.
Mhm.
But Harari says it's way more complex than that.
Mm.
And it's tied to the rise of those European empires we were just talking about.
So not just brilliant minds having a eureka moment.
There's this interplay between science and empire, he argues. The empires had the resources and the motivation to go exploring, to fund scientific research. And the discoveries often serve to justify and further those imperial ambitions.
So science and conquest went hand in hand in a way. It makes you think about the ethics of all this advancement, right? Like, how do we make sure the pursuit of knowledge doesn't become another form of exploitation or dominance?
That's the big question. And it's even more relevant now with all the rapid technological change we're seeing.
I mean, the pace of change is insane these days. Harari's view of the scientific revolution helps us understand how we got here, but it also raises even more questions about where we're going.
Totally. And remember that idea of money being a shared myth.
It's one of those things you don't really think about until someone points it out, and then it's like, whoa, how does this even work?
It only works because we all agree to believe in it.
Money doesn't have some, inherent value. Right.
Harari traces how it evolved.
Yeah.
From those early systems of bartering, like imagine using barley as money, to the invention of coins, which was revolutionary for trade, and then all the way to our modern systems, which are, let's face it, pretty complex.
It's fascinating how money, something we just made up, has become so central to our lives. People work for it, fight over it, define their worth by it.
It all comes back to the power of those shared myths. We've collectively decided that these pieces of paper or the numbers in our bank accounts represent something valuable, something worth striving for, even sacrificing for.
Okay, so money, a powerful myth. What about capitalism? That's another big one Harari tackles. It's everywhere these days, but it's also been criticized for creating inequality, damaging the environment.
He doesn't ignore those criticisms, but he also acknowledges the ways capitalism has driven innovation and improved living standards.
So it's nuanced.
He presents a complex picture. It's not about picking sides, but trying to understand both the benefits and the downsides. Like any system we humans create, capitalism has strengths and weaknesses. It's important to see both.
Yeah, there's no black and white answer. It's complicated.
Exactly. And we can't really talk about capitalism without talking about slavery, especially the Atlantic slave trade. That's a dark chapter in human history that's deeply linked to the rise of capitalism.
It's a part of history we need to confront. So much suffering, all driven by greed.
It shows how easy it is for any system to be twisted and used for exploitation. That relentless pursuit of profit, it blinded people to the suffering of others.
Okay, so we've got agriculture, empires, the scientific revolution, money, capitalism. Where does all this lead? How do we go from these isolated cultures to, well, the interconnected world we live in now?
Globalization. It's a process that's been happening for centuries, shaped by trade, empires, technology, new ideas.
Like, think about those ancient trade routes, like the Silk Road, connecting East and West, spreading goods and ideas, even diseases.
Right. And then the age of exploration with European empires reaching all corners of the globe, driven by curiosity, sure, but also greed and a thirst for power.
Those voyages changed everything. The Columbian Exchange, where they brought plants and animals from the Americas to Europe, and vice versa. Tomatoes, potatoes, horses.
It's mind-blowing. But it also brought diseases. Smallpox devastated indigenous populations in the Americas. It's a good example of how globalization can have both positive and negative consequences.
Like a mixed bag. It connects people and cultures, but can also create winners and losers. It's complicated, like everything else we've been talking about.
Globalization isn't just about economics and politics, though. Harari also talks about how these big universal religions spread, like
Oh.
Christianity, Islam, Buddhism.
They went beyond national borders, right? Created these huge communities of faith.
Exactly. It's interesting, though, how those religions, often preaching peace and compassion, were sometimes spread by those same empires and trade networks we were just discussing.
It's almost ironic. Makes you wonder about the role of power and how it influences the spread of ideas.
It highlights how complex globalization really is. It's not just about stuff and money. It's about the movement of ideas, the mixing of cultures and beliefs. And it's not a new phenomena. It's been happening for a long time.
And that's something Harari does really well in Sapiens. He challenges that Eurocentric view of history that's so common.
It's easy to forget that for centuries, civilizations in Asia, Africa, and the Americas were flourishing. They made incredible contributions to science, technology, art, all of it.
Yeah, we often get this very narrow, Western-focused version of history. It's important to remember that Europe's dominance is actually pretty recent, relatively speaking.
To really understand the human story, we need to appreciate the diversity and richness of all these different cultures, not just one. And that's one of the things I love about Harari's approach. He brings together all these different fields like history and biology and anthropology to give us this incredibly rich, multidimensional view of the human journey.
Yeah, he connects the dots, makes you question everything you thought you knew about our species.
He's not afraid to ask the big questions either. The meaning of life, the nature of happiness, where we're all headed. It's all there in Sapiens.
So let's talk about the future. What does Harari see happening? I know we've touched on some of the challenges, but what's his overall take?
He argues that we're entering this totally new phase, driven by technology that's, well, it's blurring the lines between humans and machines.
Bioengineering, AI. He even talks about the possibility of merging with technology to overcome our own limitations.
It's pretty wild, right? Like,
Yeah.
fundamentally changing what it means to be human. And scary, too.
Harari's point is that the future is more in our hands now than ever before. The choices we make, the technologies we develop, what we value it will determine what happens to our species.
He's urging us to think carefully, to consider the ethical implications of all this. It's not just about what we can do, but what we should do.
Exactly. Our values need to guide our technological advancements. We need to make sure we're using this power responsibly.
And here's something I think is really important, and Harari emphasizes this too. Even with all our technology, we're still fundamentally human. We're still driven by the same emotions, the same desires that have shaped us throughout history.
Sometimes it's easy to forget that. We get so caught up in the latest gadget or the newest scientific breakthrough.
But technology is just a tool, right? It's how we use it that matters.
It all comes back to that idea that our beliefs shape our reality. So much of what we consider real nations, money, laws, it only exists because we agree it does.
Mind-blowing, right? Makes you question the very foundation of our world.
But that's also where the danger lies, isn't it? These shared myths can be used to justify all sorts of terrible things.
Absolutely. Think about nationalism and how it's been used to turn people against each other, or religious beliefs that have been distorted to justify violence.
It's a sobering reminder that our beliefs, as powerful as they are, need to be grounded in reason, compassion, respect for human dignity. And we need to be willing to challenge those in power who exploit and oppress others.
Harari doesn't shy away from criticizing those systems. He points out that so many of the hierarchies we live with are based on arbitrary things like race or gender or social class.
It's not about actual differences in ability or worth.
Right. He's calling for us to dismantle those systems and create a world that's truly just and equitable.
It's a powerful message. We all have a responsibility to fight for a world where everyone is treated with dignity and to speak out against injustice wherever we see it.
For me, one of the most powerful parts of Sapiens is how Harari emphasizes our connection to all living things. He challenges that human-centric view that's led to so much environmental damage and the mistreatment of other species.
It's like we've forgotten that we're part of this intricate web of life, and our actions have consequences for the whole planet.
Maybe we can learn from those indigenous cultures who've lived in closer harmony with nature.
There's a lot of wisdom there, for sure. Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. Harari talks about how humans could actually become something totally different in the future, like merging with technology to create some kind of superhuman species.
That's right. It's mind-blowing. We could potentially go beyond our biological limitations and become something, well, something beyond human. It makes you question what it even means to be human. What is consciousness? What does the future hold? These are huge questions.
It's exciting and terrifying at the same time. Like, we're on the verge of something totally new.
Harari doesn't shy away from those questions. He dives right in, exploring the ethical side, the potential risks, the sheer weirdness of it all.
It feels like we're entering uncharted territory, and the choices we make now will determine everything.
Harari leaves us with a powerful message. The future isn't set in stone. We have the power to shape it. We can create an incredible world, but we also have the power to destroy ourselves.
It's a call to action. We can't just sit back and watch. We need to be active participants in building the future we want. And it starts with understanding our history, our place in the world, and how we got here.
That's exactly what Sapiens helps us do. It's a journey of self-discovery, a challenge to our assumptions, an invitation to imagine a better future for everyone.
So after this deep dive, what are you going to do with all this?
How will it change the way you see the world? The choices you make?
Those are the questions we should all be asking ourselves. What kind of ancestors do we want to be? What kind of world do we want to leave behind?
It's time to take all this knowledge, open our minds, and step into the future.
Let's use the wisdom of the past to create a world that honors our shared humanity. And it's not just about, economics and all that stuff.
Right.
Harari also talks about the spread of these big religions, like Christianity, Islam, Buddhism. They really went global.
Yeah, it created these massive communities of believers crossing all kinds of borders.
It's kind of amazing, though, how those religions, a lot of them with messages of peace and all that, were sometimes spread through those same empires and trade routes we were just talking about.
Yeah, it shows how globalization has always been about more than just material things.
Right. It's about ideas, too.
This constant mixing of cultures and beliefs.
And here's something I really appreciate about Harari's book.
Yeah.
He challenges that, that very Eurocentric view of history we often get.
It's so easy to fall into that trap, right?
He reminds us that for centuries, civilizations in Asia, Africa, and the Americas were doing incredible things.
Flourishing.
They made such important contributions to science, technology, art, you name it.
It's so important to remember that.
Yeah, Europe's dominance, it's actually pretty recent when you look at the big picture.
To really understand human history, we need to move past that narrow focus.
We need to see the bigger picture.
Appreciate all these different cultures.
What I find really striking about Sapiens is how Harari brings all these different fields together.
Totally.
History, biology, anthropology, even economics.
It gives us this incredibly rich view of humanity, multidimensional.
He's a master at connecting the dots.
You're reading along and suddenly you're like, wait a minute, I never thought about it like that.
Makes you question everything you thought you knew about us.
And he asks the big questions too.
Oh yeah, what's it all about?
The meaning of life, happiness, where we're headed.
Yeah.
It's all in there.
Okay, so let's talk about the future.
Okay.
What does Harari think is coming next? We touched on some of the challenges, but what's his overall take?
He argues that we're moving into this period of unprecedented change.
Because of technology.
Driven by it, yeah.
It's changing so fast these days.
He's talking about things that blur the lines between humans and machines.
Like what?
Bioengineering, AI. He even mentions the possibility of merging with technology to overcome our own limitations.
Like becoming superhuman.
It's a mind-blowing idea, right? It makes you think about, what does it even mean to be human anymore?
Is there even a line anymore?
It's both exciting and a little scary, for sure.
Harari's point is that we have more power than ever before to shape the future.
The choices we make now, the values we prioritize, it's all going to determine what happens to our species.
No pressure, right?
He's really urging us to be thoughtful, to consider the ethical implications of all these new technologies.
Well, just because we can do something doesn't mean we should.
Exactly.
That we need to make sure our values are guiding our progress, not just the other way around.
And this is something Harari emphasizes that I think is crucial.
Yeah.
For all our fancy technology, we're still human.
At our core.
We're still driven by those same emotions, the same desires and fears that have always shaped us.
It's so easy to get caught up in all the new gadgets and stuff and forget that.
Right, technology is just a tool.
We need to be the ones in control.
It's up to us to use it wisely.
It all comes back to that idea that our beliefs create our reality.
So much of what we consider real nations, money, laws, they're all based on shared beliefs.
It's crazy when you think about it.
It makes you question everything.
But that's also what makes us so powerful.
Harari points out that these imagined realities allow us to cooperate on a huge scale.
Like to build these complex societies and achieve amazing things.
Things we could never do on our own.
But there's a dark side to that too, right?
Of course.
Like, these shared myths can be used to justify terrible things.
Violence, oppression. We've seen it throughout history.
It's a reminder that our beliefs, while powerful, need to be grounded in something good.
Reason, compassion, respect for others.
We need to be willing to question our assumptions, be open to new evidence.
We even change our minds when we're wrong.
And we need to challenge those who abuse their power.
Harari doesn't hesitate to criticize systems that create inequality and injustice.
Like, he points out that so many of these hierarchies are based on completely arbitrary things.
Race, gender, social class. It's not about actual differences in ability or worth.
He's calling for us to dismantle those systems.
Create a world that's truly fair for everyone.
It's a powerful message.
It's a call to action.
And for me, one of the most profound parts of Sapiens is how Harari emphasizes our interconnectedness with all living things.
It's so important to remember that.
He challenges that human-centric view that's caused so much damage.
To the environment, to other species.
We've acted like we're somehow separate from nature, above it even.
And it come back to bite us, hasn't it?
Big time.
He argues for recognizing the value of all life, not just human life.
We're all part of this web.
Our actions affect everything around us.
Maybe we need to learn from those cultures that have lived in closer harmony with nature.
There's a lot of wisdom there.
Okay, now this is where it gets really trippy.
Yeah.
Harari talks about how humans could become something entirely different in the future.
Right, through technology.
Like merging with it, becoming some kind of superhuman species.
Yeah, it's a wild idea.
It makes you question what it even means to be human.
And Harari doesn't shy away from those big questions.
Oh, he dives right in.
He explores the ethics, the potential risks, the sheer strangeness of it all.
It feels like we're on the edge of something totally new and unknown.
The choices we make now will have a huge impact.
There's no going back.
Harari's final message is so important.
What's that?
We have the power to shape the future, but it's not preordained.
It's not set in stone.
We can create an amazing world, but we also have the capacity to destroy ourselves.
It's a powerful message.
It's a call to action.
We can't be passive observers.
We need to be actively involved in building the future we want.
And it all starts with understanding where we came from.
Our history, our place in the world.
How we got to this point.
And that's what Sapiens helps us do.
It challenges our assumptions, makes us think in new ways, invites us to imagine a better future.
For everyone.
So that's it for this deep dive into Yuval Noah Harari's Sapiens.
What a journey.
What are you going to do with all this new knowledge?
How will it change the way you see the world?
The choices you make.
The future is in our hands.
What will you do with yours?